My dad demanded I hand over my entire inheritance to my stepbrother, so I exposed a family secret that destroyed them both. My name is Ethan, a 27-year-old male, and I guess you could say I'm at the center of a family drama that I didn't ask for. Here's the deal. My grandma, my dad's mom, passed away last year. She left behind a house in upstate New York worth over $600,000 and around $250,000 in cash and other assets. My dad, a 52-year-old male, and my brother Lucas, a 30-year-old male, didn't get a dime. Instead, my grandma left my dad's share of the inheritance, 1/3 of her entire estate, to me. Yep, me. I didn't even know there was going to be an inheritance meeting. I got a call from my grandma's lawyer a week after her funeral, asking me to come in for a private reading of the will. I figured it was something routine, maybe even just paperwork for her estate. When I walked into the lawyer's office and saw my two aunts sitting there, I started to feel a little uneasy. It wasn't like my grandma to keep secrets, but this whole setup already felt strange. The lawyer started by explaining how the estate was being divided. 1/3 to Aunt Clara, 1/3 to Aunt Linda, and 1/3 to me. My aunts didn't seem shocked by this, which told me they already knew, but I was completely blindsided. Why would my grandma leave me a share of her estate instead of my dad? I'm not even married, I don't have kids, and honestly, I'm still figuring out my career. My dad, on the other hand, has always portrayed himself as the responsible one in the family. He's a small business owner, a father of two, and the type of guy who never misses a family gathering. It didn't make sense. The lawyer must have noticed the confusion on my face because he slid a sealed envelope across the table. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," he said. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from my grandma, dated about a year before she passed. Her familiar cursive handwriting made me tear up immediately, but as I read the letter, my sadness turned to shock. In the letter, my grandma revealed a secret that had been hidden for decades. My dad isn't Lucas's biological father. Apparently, my mom was already pregnant when she met my dad in college. They fell in love, and my dad decided to raise Lucas as his own, but my granddad wasn't having it. He thought my dad was making a huge mistake by marrying my mom and raising another man's child. It caused a massive rift in the family, and my granddad ended up disowning my dad entirely. What's wild is that my grandma stayed in touch with my dad behind my granddad's back. She'd visit us occasionally when I was a kid, but it was always framed as a quick visit or something casual. I never realized there was this whole layer of family drama happening in the background. It wasn't until my granddad passed away that my grandma started openly rebuilding her relationship with us. Even then, she clearly held some resentment toward my dad for not being upfront about the situation. Her decision to leave my dad out of the will was her way of making a statement. She felt like he had betrayed the family by keeping this secret and wanted to acknowledge the sacrifices I had made over the years. Honestly, I'm not sure what sacrifices she was talking about, but I think she saw me as the underdog in all of this. Maybe she wanted to give me a chance to build something for myself, without the pressure of constantly comparing myself to my golden boy brother. Now, I'm sitting on this massive secret, and I don't know what to do with it. My dad doesn't know I know. Lucas doesn't know either, and I haven't told anyone about the letter. It feels like a ticking time bomb. Part of me thinks my grandma should have told me this while she was still alive. At least then, I could have asked her questions, or tried to make sense of her reasoning. But instead, she left me with this burden, and now I'm the one who has to deal with the fallout. To make things even more complicated, my dad started calling me non-stop after the meeting. He wanted to know what the lawyer said, and whether there was any chance the will could be contested. When I told him the inheritance was final and legally binding, he got quiet. Then he asked me point blank, "You're going to share it with me and your brother, right?" I didn't know what to say. This money wasn't meant for him. My grandma made that decision for a reason, and I feel like I'd be disrespecting her wishes if I just handed it over. Plus, the fact that Lucas isn't biologically related to my dad adds another layer of complexity. Shouldn't he have a right to know the truth before we start talking about money? Right now, I'm keeping the letter a secret. I haven't even told my mom, though I'm starting to suspect she knows more than she's letting on. The whole situation feels like a mess, and I'm not sure how to untangle it. For now, I'm just trying to process everything and figure out my next move. But one thing's for sure, this inheritance is going to change my family forever. The days following the inheritance meeting were a whirlwind. My dad's calls were constant, practically every hour on the hour. At first I tried dodging them, I didn't feel ready to talk, how could I? It wasn't just about the money, it was about the weight of the secret I now carried. Every time my phone rang, it was like hearing the tick of a clock counting down to the inevitable explosion. Finally, after ignoring him for a full day, I decided to answer. I didn't even get a chance to say hello before he launched into it. "We need to talk," he said, his voice stern but with a hint of desperation. "I think there's been some kind of mistake. Your grandmother would never do this to me. Maybe the lawyers got it wrong." "Dad, the lawyer didn't get it wrong," I said, cutting him off. "It's all final. The will's legally binding." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his tone had shifted. He sounded less angry and more hurt. "You know what's the right thing to do, right?" I hesitated. There was a lump in my throat that made it hard to speak. "I haven't decided yet," I said, which wasn't exactly a lie. I genuinely didn't know what to do. Growing up, it always felt like my dad saved his best energy for my brother. I remember how he would always make time for Lucas's sports games, cheering from the sidelines and even coaching one of his Little League teams. When it came to me, though, my piano recitals or school art exhibitions barely got a passing mention. Lucas's accomplishments seemed to be framed as milestones for the whole family to celebrate, while mine were often dismissed as hobbies. The pattern was clear. My brother was the star, and I was the supporting act in Dad's eyes. No matter what I did, I could never quite measure up. And now there was this whole other layer to it. The knowledge that my dad wasn't even Lucas's biological father put so many things into perspective. It explained the favoritism, the extra attention, the way he always seemed to put Lucas on a pedestal. One time, when Lucas was selected as the team captain for his high school soccer team, Dad threw a huge barbecue to celebrate, inviting neighbors, family, and even some of Lucas's friends. When I won a statewide writing competition that same year, Dad mentioned it in passing at dinner but didn't even bother to read my essay. Another time, Dad gave Lucas the keys to his prized classic Mustang for prom night, trusting him completely. When I asked to borrow the family sedan for a college interview, Dad lectured me about responsibility and insisted on dropping me off instead. Once, at Lucas's graduation, Dad introduced him to every guest as the future CEO of the family, while I sat off to the side, overhearing them talk about how my major in English wouldn't pay the bills. Even small, everyday moments were a reminder of the hierarchy in our family. If Lucas needed help fixing his car or moving apartments, Dad would drop everything to assist. When I asked for a hand painting my new room, he was busy and sent me a link to a local handyman instead. These moments weren't just one-offs. They were a pattern that painted a clear picture of how my dad viewed us, Lucas as the golden child and me as an afterthought. In his attempts to make Lucas feel like his own son, he neglected his real son. It also made me feel like an idiot for not noticing it sooner. How had I missed something so obvious? My mom was oddly quiet about the whole thing. She knew about the inheritance meeting, but hadn't asked me any questions about it. That wasn't like her. Normally, she was the type to get involved in every little family matter, whether it concerned her or not. Her silence was deafening, and it made me wonder if she knew more about the situation than she was letting on. One evening, about a week after the meeting, I decided to confront her. She was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when I walked in. "Mom, can we talk?" I asked. She looked up at me, her hands stilling for just a moment before she resumed chopping. "Of course. What's on your mind?" I hesitated, unsure of how to approach the topic. "It's about the inheritance," I said finally. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed her shoulders tense, ever so slightly. "What about it? Why didn't Grandma leave anything to Dad?" I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she put down the knife and turned to face me, her hands resting on the counter. "Your grandmother had her reasons," she said carefully, "but that's between her and your father." Her evasiveness only made me more suspicious. "Mom, did you know?" I asked. "About why she made the decision she did?" She sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of years of secrets. "I had a feeling," she admitted, "but I didn't know for sure. And if I'm being honest, I'm not sure I want to know." Her answer left me with more questions than answers. But I didn't push her any further. It was clear she wasn't ready to talk about it, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear what she had to say. Meanwhile, my dad's frustration was growing. He started showing up at my place unannounced, demanding to talk. One time, he even brought Lucas with him, as if having reinforcements would make me cave. My brother, predictably, sided with my dad. "This isn't fair," Lucas said. "Grandma must have been confused when she wrote the will. She loved all of us equally." I wanted to laugh at the irony of that statement. Loved all of us equally. If only he could see how blind he'd been to the reality of our family dynamics. But instead of arguing, I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't ready to drop the big secret in the letter. Not yet. The tension was becoming unbearable. Every conversation with my dad felt like a negotiation, and every interaction with Lucas felt like a passive-aggressive guilt trip. My mom's silence only added to the pressure. I felt like I was stuck in the middle of a storm, and no matter which way I turned, I couldn't find shelter. The worst part was that I couldn't even talk to anyone about it. My friends wouldn't understand, and I didn't trust anyone in the family enough to confide in them. So I kept it all bottled up, hoping that somehow, some way, things would work themselves out. But deep down, I knew that was just wishful thinking. This wasn't the kind of problem that went away on its own. I came home from work one evening to find both my dad and Lucas sitting in their car outside my apartment. My heart sank. I had been dodging their calls for days, hoping they'd back off if I gave them space. Clearly that wasn't going to happen. As I walked up the path, they got out of the car. My dad was visibly irritated, while Lucas had the look of someone who had been simmering in his own anger for far too long. "We need to talk," Dad said, his tone brooking no argument. I sighed, unlocking my door. "Fine, come in." The moment we were inside, Dad got straight to the point. "We're not leaving until you explain yourself. This inheritance nonsense ends tonight." I dropped my bag on the counter and leaned against the kitchen island. "What's there to explain? Grandma made her decision. It's not my fault you don't like it." Lucas scoffed, crossing his arms. "Don't act like you don't know this is wrong. That money wasn't just for you. It was supposed to help the whole family. Do you have any idea how much I could use it right now?" "Yeah," I said flatly, "because everything's always about you." "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped, taking a step closer. "It means," I said, standing up straight, "that you've always been Dad's golden boy. You've gotten everything handed to you your whole life, and now you're mad because this one thing isn't going your way." "That's ridiculous," Lucas said, his voice rising. "I've worked for everything I have." "Oh really?" I shot back. "Like that car Dad bought you in college? Or the down payment he co-signed on your house? Or maybe the time he paid for your wedding while I got a good luck text when I moved out?" "That's not fair," Dad cut in, his face turning red. "I've done plenty for you too." "Name one thing," I challenged. "Name one time you've gone out of your way for me the way you have for him." The silence that followed was deafening. My dad looked down, avoiding my gaze, while Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Look," Dad said after a moment, his voice softer now. "I know things haven't always been even between you two, but that doesn't mean you can just take this money and shut us out. We're a family. Families stick together." I laughed bitterly. "Family? Don't start preaching about family now. Where was all this family talk when I needed help, when I needed support?" Dad didn't have an answer for that. Lucas, however, wasn't about to back down. "You're being selfish," he said. "This isn't about what Dad did or didn't do. This is about Grandma. She made a mistake, and you're using it to punish us." I shook my head, incredulous. "A mistake? You think this was a mistake? Maybe she finally saw things for what they were. Maybe she wanted to do something for me because no one else ever has." "That's not true," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I've spent my whole life trying to measure up to him." I gestured toward Lucas. "And nothing I ever did was good enough. But now, for once, I have something that's mine, and you can't stand it." My dad's face fell, and for the first time, he looked genuinely remorseful. "I didn't realize you felt that way," he said quietly. "How could you not?" I asked, my frustration boiling over. "You've spent years making it clear who your favorite was, and now you're here demanding that I give up the one thing Grandma left me. Do you even hear yourself?" Lucas took a step forward, his anger bubbling to the surface again. "This isn't about favoritism. This is about what's right, and what's right is splitting the inheritance equally." "What's right," I said, meeting his gaze, "is respecting Grandma's wishes. And if you can't do that, then that's on you, not me." The room fell silent again, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. My dad finally broke the silence, running a hand through his hair. "Look, maybe we all need some time to cool off, but this conversation isn't over." As he turned to leave, Lucas glared at me one last time. "You're going to regret this," he said. "Maybe," I replied, "but at least I'll know I didn't let anyone bully me into giving up what's mine." The tension with Dad and Lucas had been simmering for weeks, but after their ambush at my apartment, I knew it was only a matter of time before something boiled over. I couldn't shake the anger from our confrontation, but what weighed even heavier on me was the secret I had been keeping, the truth about my brother's parentage. I had wrestled with whether to tell them, but every passing day made it harder to keep quiet. If they were going to keep badgering me about the inheritance, they had to know why Grandma made her decision. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My dad showed up at my apartment again, this time alone. It was late, just past 9 o'clock in the evening, and I had just sat down with a drink, hoping for a quiet evening. The sound of his knock startled me, and I hesitated before answering. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I knew he wouldn't leave until we talked. When I opened the door, he stood there, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. His shoulders were slumped, and the hard edge in his expression from the last time was gone. Instead, there was something softer, almost pleading. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low. I stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. He didn't bother with small talk, going straight to the living room and sitting down on the couch. I stayed by the kitchen counter, keeping some distance between us. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, clasping his hands together, "about how you felt overlooked. I didn't mean to make you feel that way." "It's not just about how I feel," I said, crossing my arms. "It's about how things have always been. You've spent years making excuses for treating me like I didn't matter. And now that Grandma called you out on it, you're scrambling to make it my problem." Dad winced but didn't interrupt. I could see the wheels turning in his head, like he was trying to find the right words. Finally, he said, "Your brother needed more from me. That's just the way it was." "Don't," I said sharply, cutting him off. "Don't sit there and try to justify it. This isn't just about him needing more. This is about you giving him everything while I got the leftovers." Dad sighed heavily, leaning forward and rubbing his temples. "I did the best I could. You don't understand what it was like trying to hold this family together." "Hold it together?" I shot back. "You mean holding on to a lie?" His head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" It was now or never. I walked over to the coffee table, picking up the letter I had left there after my last confrontation with him and Lucas. I handed it to him, my hand shaking slightly as I did. "Read this," I said, my voice hard. He hesitated, looking at the envelope like it might bite him, but eventually took it. As he unfolded the letter, I sat down across from him, watching as his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something close to panic. When he finished, he stared at the paper for a long moment, his hands trembling. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since the will reading," I replied. "Grandma left it for me." He leaned back against the couch, running a hand through his hair. "She shouldn't have told you, it wasn't her place." "Maybe not," I said, "but she did. And honestly, I'm glad she did. At least now I know the truth." "The truth," he repeated bitterly, shaking his head. "The truth is complicated." "Is it?" I challenged, "because it seems pretty straightforward to me. You've been lying to him, lying to both of us, our whole lives." Dad looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "It wasn't a lie. Your brother is my son in every way that matters. Biology doesn't change that. But it does change things, doesn't it?" I pressed. "You've spent your whole life trying to make him feel like he belongs, and in the process you pushed me aside. You don't think that had an impact?" "I was trying to do the right thing," he said, his voice breaking. "I was trying to be a good father to both of you." I stood up, pacing the room as my frustration boiled over. "A good father? Do you even hear yourself? You've been so busy compensating for him that you didn't even notice the damage you were doing to me. And now you're here, acting like you're the victim because Grandma finally called you out on it." He stood too, his face red with anger. "You don't know what it was like. I loved your mother, but her past, it wasn't easy to accept. I had to fight to prove that I could be the man she needed, the father your brother needed. I sacrificed everything for this family. And what about me?" I demanded. What did you sacrifice for me? The question hung in the air like a challenge. For a moment he looked like he might say something, but then his shoulders slumped, and he sat back down. I don't know, he admitted quietly. I don't know what I could have done differently. His honesty caught me off guard, deflating some of my anger. But it wasn't enough to erase years of resentment. You could have treated me like I mattered, I said, my voice trembling. You could have shown me the same love and support you gave him. Instead, you let me feel like I was never good enough. Dad looked down at his hands, his expression heavy with guilt. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, he said softly. I thought you were strong enough not to need as much from me. That's not how it works, I said. You don't get to pick and choose who deserves your attention. I needed you, and you weren't there. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything we'd said settling over us like a thick fog. Finally, Dad looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. For everything. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't forgive him. His apology was too little, too late. Words can't undo decades of being treated like I was the backup plan. And now, armed with the truth, I wasn't about to roll over and let them guilt me out of what was rightfully mine. If anything, his confession confirmed what I already knew. I had spent my entire life being sidelined for someone who wasn't even his own flesh and blood. But I wasn't done yet. After the conversation at my apartment, I felt like the walls were closing in on me. The letter was out in the open now, at least to Dad. But Lucas still didn't know. And it wasn't like Dad was going to rush to tell him. A week later, the family's next move came. I got an email from a lawyer my dad hired, announcing that he and Lucas intended to contest the will. They claimed Grandma was not of sound mind when she wrote it. I almost laughed when I read it. It was such a desperate, last-ditch attempt to get their hands on something that wasn't meant for them. But I knew this wasn't just a money grab anymore. It was a power move. They couldn't handle the idea of me, the afterthought, holding something they couldn't control. I forwarded the email to my own lawyer, adding a short message. Let's end this. The court proceedings were long and brutal. My dad and Lucas pulled every trick they could think of to discredit Grandma's decision. They even tried to drag my aunts into it, hoping they'd side with them. But Clara and Linda shut that down fast. My aunts may not have always been close to Grandma, but they respected her wishes. They testified that she was sharp as ever when she made the will and that she had been clear about her reasons. My lawyer was a shark, and we came prepared. The letter Grandma left me became a key piece of evidence, though I still hadn't told Lucas what it said. The court agreed with us. Grandma's will stood as written. Dad and Lucas lost their challenge, and the inheritance stayed mine. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. Lucas showed up at my door a few days after the ruling, uninvited as usual. He was fuming, his face red with anger. He didn't even wait for me to invite him in. He just barged past me and started yelling. This is bull, he shouted, pacing my living room. You know this isn't fair. She wasn't in her right mind, and you know it. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall. The court disagreed. You're just mad you didn't get what you wanted. It's not about what I want, he snapped. It's about what's right. Grandma wouldn't have done this if she wasn't being manipulated. I raised an eyebrow. Manipulated? By who, exactly? You think Aunt Clara and Aunt Linda brainwashed her? Or maybe me, the guy who didn't even know he was getting anything until the lawyer called? You don't deserve that money, he said, his voice venomous. You've never had to work for anything. You're just sitting on your ass while Dad and I are busting ours trying to keep everything together. That did it. I laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that made him stop in his tracks. You think I've never worked for anything? Are you serious right now? I've been busting my ass my whole life trying to prove myself to Dad while you got handed everything on a silver platter. The car, the house, the business connections. Don't even try to play the victim here. Lucas sneered. You're so full of yourself. You think you're better than me because Grandma gave you some money? Newsflash, Ethan, you're still nothing. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't let his words get to me. Instead, I stepped closer, meeting his glare head-on. You know what, Lucas? You're right about one thing. I don't need to prove myself to you or Dad anymore. Grandma saw through the act, and now I do too. You can keep being Dad's favorite. I'm done playing your stupid games. He opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. Oh, and before you go running to Dad crying about this, maybe ask him why he never told you the truth about where you come from. That stopped him cold. His eyes narrowed. What the hell are you talking about? I grabbed the letter from the coffee table, the same one I had shown Dad, and shoved it into his hands. "Read it. Then come back and tell me how much you think I don't deserve this." Lucas looked at the envelope, then back at me, suspicion and confusion warring on his face. He snatched it from me and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The fallout was immediate. I don't know what exactly happened when Lucas confronted Dad, but a few days later, I got a call from my mom. She was in tears, begging me to talk to Lucas. I don't remember her giving this emotional reaction when I moved out. Apparently, Lucas had moved out of Dad's house and wasn't answering anyone's calls. I told her flat out that it wasn't my problem. "You dragged me into this mess," I said. "You can deal with the consequences." For the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from the guilt, the resentment, the constant need to measure up to their impossible standards. I had the money Grandma left me. But more importantly, I had the truth, and I wasn't afraid to use it. I cut contact with Dad and Lucas after that. My mom still calls occasionally, but our conversations are short and surface level. She doesn't ask about the inheritance, and I don't offer any updates. As far as I'm concerned, they can all keep each other company. They wanted their golden child so badly, well, now they have him. Meanwhile, I'm building my own life. I sold Grandma's house and used the money to start my own business, something I've wanted to do for years. I'm not saying everything's perfect, but for the first time in a long time, I'm living for me, and it feels damn good.